So appreciate the prompts. Yeah. Yeah, I'll probably do the same thing. Yeah, the thing is like service and work. Stuff. Yeah, that's the. In addition to the word you guys so I do want to Thanks.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we are going to start with the roll call.
Okay, so just so everyone knows, I know that we have new senators and the roster of senators has been updated on the website, and we'll show you that in just a moment. If you are here and you are a representative on a committee, but not a senator, then we appreciate that you're here, but you won't be on the senator roll and you won't be here for attendance purposes. So don't worry about that. So if you are a senator and I don't call your name, it may be that I just wasn't informed about that, and that's perfectly fine. With these first couple of meetings, just let me know and I can sort that out. All right, so we'll start with Alan. Here. Great. Banford. Boyd.
Here.
Brock. Here. Buzan.
Here.
Karamanica.
Here.
Chang.
Here.
Council.
Here.
Cuomo.
Here.
Doms as a proxy.
Whereas for Dom's.
Great, gotcha. Davis.
Here.
Dutt.
Here.
Dyer.
Wait a minute.
Okay. Elias. Will be absent. Ellison.
Here.
Fujita. Green.
Here.
Griffin.
Here.
Hadley.
Here.
Hampton. I think I might be here. Jansen.
Here.
Yara Pasmino.
Here.
Kazim.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Great. Maggiano.
Here.
Matthews.
Present.
McLean.
Here.
Mendes. No. Moon. Morales.
Here.
Ofoe.
Here.
Did I say that correctly? Perry. Riker.
Here.
Roberts.
Here.
Ruffin.
Here.
Song. Shelnut. Shepherd. Here. Shin.
Here.
I'm gonna get this wrong. Sigiano.
Here.
Great. Swift.
Here.
Talbot. Here. Viswanath. Here. Waters. Wentz. Wofford. Yang. Yarbrough. All right, and that is,
Excuse me.
yes.
That's filling in for Regina.
Oh, great. Okay, let me make a note.
Elias is here as
Okay,
All right, so the meeting minutes from May were approved electronically, so we can roll right into our administrative report. So I'd like to welcome up our president and our provost.
Well, good afternoon. Can you all hear me well at the back? Okay. All right, so it's a pleasure for me to be here. I'm gonna take maybe 20 minutes talking and then take any questions that you may have. So thanks for inviting me to this meeting. Let me just start with some brief telling you a bit about myself, why I'm here, what I plan to do while I'm here, and then how we'll do it. So first, Ashwani Monga. I like to be called by my first name, Ashwani, but we'll go with whatever norm suits you best. So I grew up in India, came to the US 25 years ago, 1999. Went to both me and my wife together went to the University of Minnesota for a PhD. And if you're wondering why we chose Minnesota, it was the only school that took both of us in. So that's why. So we went to Minnesota for a PhD, and then moved around. And now, by the way, she's a faculty member at Georgia State. And so and then we moved around a bit. So we were from Minnesota. First job was at the University of Texas, San Antonio. In fact, I was thinking of the faculty senate because I think I was in maybe my second year on the job, and they put me on the faculty senate, and I had no idea. This is now 20 years ago, but it turned out to be a fun experience because I got to meet people all across, the institution when I was at UT San Antonio. So that was my first exposure to the faculty senate, and of course, since then I've had other interactions in different schools. After Texas, I was in South Carolina for a few years, then went back up north, was in Jersey at Rutgers. And then came to Georgia a little over 2 years ago. So my role in the system office, I'm the executive vice chancellor and chief academic officer. And so why am I here as interim president? One, because your president left, and two, because my chancellor asked me to. And when Chancellor Perdue says anything, you say yes. So I said yes. But another reason for me saying yes was because I have been involved with many things happening here. I don't know how much of each of you know how the institution works with the system office and what I do. So I'll just give you a brief overview of what I do as Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Academic Officer. So I have 4 main units. One is Academic Affairs and Student Success. That's where all programs from across the state come over to our office, and then if we approve, we take it to the chancellor and the board. And then finally, all programs are approved. I mean, and if you're new faculty members, just to let you know, this is kind of a unique state in which everything goes up to one board of regents, and all presidents report to that board. Report to the chancellor. And the Board of Regents hires the chancellor. The chancellor has his presidents, and then the chancellor has his office, like me. Like I'm his chief academic officer. He has a chief fiscal officer. He's a chief operations officer. And then we, on behalf of the chancellor, coordinate on different things. Like I coordinate on anything academic across the 26 institutions. And so one of my units is, on which has programs and momentum, student success things, study abroad, accreditation, which also has, because it's kind of compliance. So it's accreditation as well as athletics. And so So this is a unit, the e-campus, even though it operates through here, it's a university system office. So there are anything you can think of as directly as academic faculty or student that's kind of in this, with this vice chancellor. A second vice chancellor is over enrollment management and student affairs. Again, think of anything connected to these two functions. A third one is academic innovation, which is kind of, anything new happening, any collaborative programs, like on data science, for example, in which we need to kind of, have centrally do something so that everyone has access to education in a certain area. The FinTech Academy kind of also, it's housed in Georgia State, but it's also a UWG system. And also the Georgia Film Academy, that's also part of that unit. And then the fourth one I have is libraries and archives, which is kind of unique to academic affairs because it has, so the Georgia Public Library Service is part of that. So the state librarian is the vice chancellor of that unit. We also have the state archivist. So archiving, record keeping is also part of my unit, and then other interaction with university libraries, Affordable Learning Georgia on textbooks. So all of that happens in that unit. So my work involves the 26 institutions, but then there are these statewide entities like the Georgia Film Academy, which goes beyond the 26 TCSG private schools. Of course, the public library system, we have, I think, 420 something public libraries, the archives and so on. So there are some units which are outside 26, but so that's broadly my unit. And so in that context, I have worked very closely with West Georgia. I mean, pretty much anything big that may have happened here, most of it comes through my office. If you think of any programs that come through my office, I have the athletic compliance person is in my office. So when we started the D1 thing, it kind of went to my office, and then we get fiscal and others involved. You think of new colleges, naming, all of that kind of comes through my office, and then we involve others in fiscal and other areas. So the D1, of course, is a big move for here. And if you haven't noticed, this entire season we're undefeated at one goal, but so we'll, so I'm excited about that as well. So all of this to say that I have been working, you may not have realized it, but I have been working very closely on lots of things related to West Georgia. So when this opportunity came up and the chancellor said, hey, I'm going to be looking for a permanent president and I want you back, but you want to go there for 2 months. It was also because I was very familiar with the place. And so I felt like I could add value here since I understood things. And then once I go back to the system office, I can, I'll have more understanding of West Georgia, and I can do some good from there as well. Now you may be thinking, how long am I an interim? When will you get a real president? So no one knows. I don't know. The chancellor couldn't tell you. The board chair couldn't tell you because these things are very unpredictable. I do have an inside view because when presidents are hired, the board interviews them, but I'm in the room as well. So I've seen these processes unfold for other institutions. They are very unpredictable, right? It kind of, you have to, at this point, the search hasn't even started. It'll start, then you get candidates, then you interview, then you may not like someone, you have more interviews, then you negotiate on when you'll start. So there are lots of things that happen. So to me, the latest could be next July when you may have a permanent president, but it could be if they find someone, it would be before, right? So it kind of, that's, I don't think it would happen in the next 3, 4, 5 months. But if they found someone who was willing to start earlier in January 1, for example, I'm sure that could happen. But like I said, I don't know, and no one could tell you because everyone knows it's an uncertain process. But my philosophy is, whether I'm here for one day or whether I'm here for 10 years, I wake up in the morning and I'm like, okay, it's a blessing to have a day. How can I do good work? How can I make good things happen today? That's how I work. And so to me, kind of, I've been here for 3 weeks now, and my leadership team will tell you that I'm fully committed on the job, and so for me, I just take it like, okay, I'm here. How can I do a good job? being interim does change things a bit in terms of how you operate. Like, so for me, that difference would be just in terms of not doing anything, any significant structural change that may then saddle the next president, right? So I don't want to, that's kind of one aspect. And so it may mean kind of, if I have a choice, can this expenditure wait? Then I may save that money and say, okay, let's see what happens instead of just going ahead and spending it, because the president may make other choices. That's one aspect. And then also in terms of not getting into things where there may be broad disagreements, right? And what I mean by that is, I could have, as president, you could have different goals, right? So I may say, we need to be an R1 institution. And half the group says, yes, I love it. This person would be excited. But half the person says, yes, we love it. And half the group says, no, that's not our goal. That's not our mission. And then we have that. So for me, as interim, especially as an interim who wants to do things, I don't intend to be a passive interim to just kind of hold the seat. I want to be an active interim. So I want to do things, but I don't want to do things where I'm spending months trying to find consensus. I want to do things which everyone would agree on, and where there shouldn't be any controversy on what is needed, right? So, and that's why when you saw my letter, if you did read my letter, which I sent out to faculty and staff, I talked specifically about graduation rates. So to me, it was something which I don't think any of you would disagree, that having good graduation rates is welcome views, right? And if you do disagree, let's talk separately. So I want to pick things which people agree on. I've been talking to my team, with the provost and others. I've been highlighting how I work in terms of process and transparency and collective decision making and so on. So I want to be focused on those things which, again, people would generally agree on. I don't want to spend my time, few months trying to argue, trying to kind of figure out or push for things which only I believe in. I just want to push for things which pretty much everyone would believe in. And why graduation rates? I mean, I said some of this in my letter, and it's simply because it's not to blame what West Georgia has been doing, because West Georgia has been doing well on many counts. At the same time, we are lagging behind and kind of in pretty much any comparison. So if you looked at comprehensive institutions within the state, we're lagging behind on graduation. If you look at our own track records, so the 6-year graduation rate, is basically 2018 to 2024. That's kind of within the six-year period. We had about 42.7%. I think that's the graduation rate. So about 2 out of 5 students graduate in 6 years. Our comprehensives on aggregate are doing better. The university system on aggregate is about 3 in 5. The nation on aggregate is about 3 in 5, which is also not great, right? If you have 3 out of 5 students graduate in 6 years, that itself is a tragedy. But we are, so again, it's not schools like West Georgia have been kind of, around these numbers. But now that we're trying to kind of elevate ourselves, not just on D1, but elevate in so many ways, it is something which we have to do better. All right. So I was saying, I gave the number for where we are currently, and we've done well the last 3 years or so. It has gone up, it has improved, but we're actually still below what we were pre-COVID. So our 2013 graduation rate was higher than what it is today, right? So while many other schools have not only gone up after COVID, because there was a dip for everyone during COVID, many other schools have come back and moved up beyond where they were, and we're still lagging. So that is definitely something important, and it's important for many reasons. One is simply, for the students who are spending their money and spending the prime years of their life going to college, thinking this is gonna, their lives are gonna be better, and they're gonna uplift their families, and then they spend a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then have nothing to show for it. That's bad for them, that's bad for their families, that's for the state of Georgia, where we're trying to meet our workforce needs. And that's really bad for us as a brand. I'm a marketing professor, so there's nothing like negative word of mouth to devastate a brand, right? So you could think about buying a car. I could do look at national surveys, and someone tells me car X is the best car in the world. And then I talk to Dylan, and Dylan says, hey, wait a second, I just had this car last year, and it turned out to be a lemon, right? That's all I need. I'm not going to buy that car, despite all the data out there, right? So negative word of mouth can be very, very potent. And so when you look at, the thousands of students every year who leave West Georgia with some credits and no degree, you can imagine the negative word of mouth that in fact, it's more than the positive word of mouth, even if we assume that everyone graduating is delighted with West Georgia. The ones who are not graduating are more, right? So you can imagine the message that's going out there. And so that is a problem. And unless we really fix it, it's like a vicious loop. It'll keep coming back to us in different ways, with students not coming here, with philanthropic dollars not coming in. It'll just keep coming back to us in many ways. So how do we, the next thing I want to talk about is like, if we have this problem, what do we do, right? So how do we solve it? And so the first thing to me is just communication, just talking openly about this. Like I said, I believe in openness, transparency, and at least within the family. Again, I'm a marketing professor. I know that once you're out and we're selling a message, we got to sell and get students and do other things. But when we're within the family, we need to be honest and say, this is where we are and we can do better. And so my first ask to this group, since you're leading the faculty, is to how can you make sure other faculty know about it? Because I can assure you, having been a faculty member who never knew anything about graduation rates until I got into administration, they would know, right? So to me, the first thing is, can we make sure that faculty members are aware of how things are, so that they know? That's kind of first understanding the problem itself. The second one is, once we know this exists, what can we do? And so my approach to this is, I think in terms of, you may be familiar with the momentum approach that we use for our students. We also have a momentum center here, and it's, the momentum efforts are coordinated through my office, which are these efforts on how do you retain and graduate students, right? Because graduation is a big picture thing. Then there's retention yearly, then there's semester, then there are small things like our students getting early alerts and things like that, right? You can go down micro and micro. So for the students, what we say in the momentum approach is three things. One is mindset. Hey, you need to have the right growth mindset. You need to know that you can learn. You may not understand math today, but that doesn't mean you're just bad at math. It just means you may have to learn differently. It just means you may have to work harder, but you can change, right? And to me, that is a message, that growth mindset is a message that's honestly not only good for students, it's good for all of us. I just met some leaders in the staff today, and some department chairs and others too. And that was my message, which is, how do we kind of ourselves feel in terms of that, of that mindset, right? We're saying D1, that's a big jump, because D1 isn't just about athletics. It isn't just football. It's about excellence in everything we do. And how do we feel pride in that? Hey, we are a D1 school, and we excel at things, and we teach well, and we do, top level research and everything else, right? So it's not something, everything I'm saying in this room, I'm sure none of that will be news to you. But the reason I'm saying this is because when we make decisions, when we live our lives, it's not determined by everything we know, it's determined by what's salient. And I feel like as a leader, my job is to make that salient and say, this is, no, let's keep this top of mind, right? Let it not be somewhere buried inside, let it be top of mind when we have our interactions. So that's the first thing. How can we have that mindset for ourselves? Because if we don't have it, we can't, transfer it to our students. We can't make them feel that, hey, you can grow, right? So that's part one. The second one is purpose, which is when we tell our students, pick your major right away, plan for your career, who do you want to be, attend this, do this internship. We're kind of showing them a goal and saying, this is who you can be. And so think in terms of that purpose. Why are you here, right? And again, to me, the same can apply to us, right? What is our purpose, right? I mean, we are in higher education because we care about education, we care about students, we care about advancing. We realize things which many of our students don't. For example, our students, if you do a bachelor's degree, over a lifetime, you're making more than $1 million in addition to what you would if you didn't have a bachelor's degree, right? So that's your lifetime earnings. Actually, this number has now gone up beyond $1 million. So there's significant income potential. But we, as educators, know that it's not only about income. It's about finding meaning. It's about finding purpose. It's about living a fulfilled life. It's about the intellectual experience. All of that is fulfilling in its own right, right? So we know there is so much value that comes in with higher ed, but do our students know it, right? So we know our purpose, but then are we able to convey that purpose to our students in terms of this is what education means to you? Because at the end of the day, when we say West Georgia is doing something, for one student, it's not some amorphous entity. It is 2, 4, 5 people at West Georgia. That's what West Georgia means to them. It's a couple of friends they have. It'll be that one-star faculty member who changed their life. It'll be some staff member who helped them when they really needed help. That's what West Georgia is. And even for us, right? I mean, when someone asks you, what do you think about West Georgia? You're thinking about a small group of people that defines kind of the brand for you. So each of us has a very, very significant role because we would be that person for many of our students and even outside of our students, even for each other, right? I mean, I'm a big believer that this is, you can't fake these things when you interact with students. You have to genuinely have that kind of, that kindness toward others. And it starts with ourselves, right? It starts with first self-compassion, having, it's like loving yourself. Then you start loving others. Then you start going beyond to students and others you may not interact as frequently with, or you may see them once in a class and then they go somewhere else. So it has to kind of start with you and start with us as a group. And then it's about what happens in a classroom, right? So in a classroom, which is where we can do whatever we need in wraparound services and we can have awesome staff. But at the end of the day, students are spending time, most of the time in the classroom, whether remotely or whether in person, right? So how can we touch them during that period? We have, my unit was working last year on core impacts on the revised gen ed curriculum. And one of the key things in that one is how do you articulate the meaning of this course for you, right? So if you have a student, you're teaching math. If you're teaching math, math is important, right? No one needs to tell you that math is important because you teach math. But someone who's an English major finds it meaningless. They're like, why are you making me take a math class? I'm an English major and you're forcing me to take a math class. And so it's up to the math professor to then articulate and convey that excitement, right? A big thing that I've been telling staff members as well is it's not enough to do the job, which all of you are doing. You also have to sometimes articulate, especially when things go tough, right? As a staff member, someone asks you for financial aid and you're like, you do all the work and then you send a one-liner saying, yeah, sorry, you're not going to get it. And what I'm encouraging people is to say, tell them, that, hey, I've been working, I did this, so that they get the context. They know that you followed process, that you did things, and then you failed. And that goes a long way, right? So sometimes you have to articulate not just that I worked hard, but also that I worked hard for you, and let me tell you what I did, so that the student understands, right? The same thing goes in classroom. When you're trying to tell people, this is the purpose of why I'm teaching this class, you know, all of us know, I'm a marketing professor. If I'm teaching marketing, no one has to convince me that it's important in the world, but I have to convince the students that this is why it's important, even if you never work in marketing, right? So, and I think all of us can do that more. It's again, it's not about whether faculty teach well or not, right? I mean, that's kind of a different dimension. I'm saying for the ones who do teach well, taking that, taking their perspective and saying, I'm doing a great job, I'm working hard for you, articulating that and telling them this is what it means for you, that goes a long way. Showing them what happens next, again, what their purpose is in their careers, right? This is how it builds up. Who do you want to be, and how it builds up to who you want to be. That is what makes the connection for them, right? I mean, I'll kind of a slight detour, but AI, right? Artificial intelligence, something I'm really big on nowadays, because I think it's going to transform everything that we do in higher ed in a very, very short time. But the reason I thought of it right now is because, if you're familiar with Khan Academy, and they have Khan Migo, which is the AI tutor. And what it does is it's already become very successful. And what it does is things like it asks a student, let's say if you're doing parabolic functions, right, in math, and the student is like, I don't want to know because I'm not interested. And then the tutor says, okay, what are you interested in? And the person says, I love soccer, right? Something unrelated. But then you can connect it to soccer and say, well, if you're trying to hit a ball and then this goes, and this is the curvature of the ball, this is what the graph looks like. That's why you need to understand, right? So that's how it goes. And to some extent, this is what we kind of have to, because everything, when we're faculty, we've studied, we've taught, we know that at some level, everything connects to everything. But we have to form those connections, and these students don't always see those connections. Right? So what can we do? How can we find purpose for ourselves? How can we make sure that that purpose is, that's something students see, and that they see that, that act of kindness. Again, the reason I'm saying all of us matter is because at the end of the day, you will be one of those 5 people for a bunch of students, right? You will be one of those. You don't know who those would be. It may be, you may say one thing. I'm sure all of us have stories. I have my stories. I'm sure you have stories where students come to you years later and you say, remember you taught this in your class that day, or you told me this that day. This is what I was going through. But because you said that, and that changed me, right? So all of us will have those stories, but we never know when we have an impact, right? That's why I was talking about kind of having that salience, because if we know that every time we're interacting with them, who knows what life I would change? Because this is when we talk about graduation, it's only 2 things. Either someone has been going through a difficult time, and then they go to dining and the food sucks and they're like, I'm done, right? It's that last straw, which, because it's been building up for years. And finally, you're like, I'm done. I can't stay here anymore. And on the flip side, it could be where you're about to go, and then you have some interaction in someone in dining, and that person is very kind, and it's like, hey, what's going on, or we can help you. And suddenly you're like, you know what, this is a good place. I like people here. West Georgia is good, and you stay. So again, we never know what that last straw may be on the negative or positive side, but all of us, for someone, are going to be that last straw, right? So kind of having that, so we have that, kind of that responsibility, and we could flip things, right? It's sometimes, we think, well, this is the only interaction I have, but sometimes you just need that you may be at the right time where things make a difference. So having that purpose for yourself, for the students, and then the third one, I said mindset and purpose, and third one is pathways. which is kind of what I've been discussing, which is it's not enough to have a goal. That's what we tell our students. What's your purpose? Well, my purpose is I want to make money. I want to become an engineer. I want to become this. I want to become a nurse. Okay, then what are the pathways? Because if you want to become a nurse, you'll first have to do this anatomy physiology class. Do you think you can do this? Here's the syllabus for that, because this is where most of our kids in nursing programs, it is a bottleneck course, right? So when you can be upfront and say, this is what it is. You may think of nursing as empathy and I love meeting people and serving people, but it's much more than that, right? So we kind of give them a realistic sense. So we build those pathways, or we have program maps which deliver what, where we're headed. And the same thing goes for us, which is how do we build our pathways through our interaction with students. When we're teaching, simple things can make, like again on the core, we are insisting on having syllabi which have clear outcomes, career-ready competencies. It seems, it may seem trivial, but these things make a huge difference. People may learn persuasion in a history class, but they don't realize they have learned persuasion. Someone has to tell them that, hey, look at this, we are doing persuasion. And then they start thinking, what is persuasion? And they're like, well, this is how you change opinions and attitudes. That's why we have these discussions, because this is how you change. This is how the world changes. The world changes through conversation. The world changes through convincing others that you need to move this way or that way, right? It becomes a conversation starter. And then they realize, and they go out and they say, yeah, what did you learn? Well, I learned persuasion in this class, not just I'm a chemistry major, why am I doing history, right? So because that would be, if things stay at a very concrete basic level, they'll never see the connection. So you have to kind of elevate it to what are the learning outcomes, what are the career-ready competencies, and it's not just in class, right? I mean, I'm sure most people in this room, you have some mentees in some form, formally or informally, you interact with students. How can that conversation make a difference? Because that's what we need. It's one student at a time. When we look at this, I'm giving a statistic of graduation rates. The statistic is, at the end of the day, it's individual students, the ones you interact with, and what you do, what faculty do, makes the most impact, because that's whom they're spending time with. And a word of kindness, something about, how you believe in a student, because honestly, we do have, because I'm sure another thing many of you are thinking as well, I teach a certain class and students aren't prepared. Well, I'll tell you, looking at our SAT scores, looking at other credentials, and if we compare, I was talking to an enrollment person, if we compare that to other schools with similar incoming cohorts, we're doing much worse on graduation rate. So it's not, yes, there is something on, which students you get, but it's not like, our students are pretty good and they deserve a better rate of graduation than happens here. And the other thing that happens is sometimes you don't realize as an individual faculty member, you think, let's say if I'm teaching a class, right? And someone is taking 5 classes a semester, and think of a student where in every class, their probability of success of passing the class is 90%, right? So you would think of that as a good student, somebody who can, there's a 90% chance this person will succeed, right? But when you have 10% who don't, right? So because even 90%, right? I mean, I don't want to get into math, but if you have a probability of 0.9 and you have the same probability in 5, what's the chance you would succeed in all 5? It's 0.9 multiplied by 0.9 5 times, which brings you to about 60%. Okay, so that itself should tell you that even when someone is a promising student who has a 90% chance of success in the class, but to get everything right is still a big deal, right? It's like you have to do it right every time. One of the quotes I used in my letter was from Anna Karenina on, how happy families are similar or the same. Happy families are happy similarly, something like that. But unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. And the point of that is for happiness to happen, for success to happen, everything has to, like this student has to pass every class, but then they can move on to the other one. But for those who don't succeed, and this is not just about students, it's for everyone. You don't know which link breaks. You don't know where it falters, right? It could be a zillion different things that happen in our life. All of us in this room are fortunate to have great careers, great work environments, great intellectual settings of classrooms and others. But that happened because of course, all of us worked hard, but all of us also had good fortune where step after step we succeeded, right? And at any of those steps, something could have happened. One thing could have happened, personal, profession, whatever, and this whole thing would have fallen apart. And the same can happen for a student. So kind of just having that mindset of, how do we look at it from that student's perspective who has promise and who can do better with a bit more help, which is what we're here for, right? I mean, we're not here just for a paycheck, right? Academia is not a very well-paid profession. All of you are smart people. If you went out, you could earn more if you went, outside academia. But we do it because there is more than just a paycheck, right? There is meaning, there is purpose, there are all the things we're talking about. And to me, showing that, expressing that to students where they see this is why you're doing it for me. That's why I was saying mindset, purpose, and pathways, because I think showing them, sharing the purpose, the pleasure you derived from studying yourself. This is not just, yes, you will make more money, but I studied, and this is why I studied. It was, because it meant something to me. This is how it changed me, even when I studied something which wasn't connected to my profession. Conveying that enthusiasm. Again, I'm not saying this because you guys don't do it. I'm saying this because to me, it is about having these things salient in our heads all the time. Where we send, it's like those affirmations. We kind of remind ourselves that this is important, and which guides the interactions you have with others. So I've spoken longer than I intended. So let me pause and see if there are any questions. Yes, please.
So you mentioned about the
Do you mind saying your name? Area you're in?
Jason Swift art. We met at the faculty council at Savannah.
Yes, yeah, I've actually met several here, but honestly,
it's totally cool.
Yeah.
It's totally cool. So you mentioned the negative word of mouth. How does that also translate to campus appearance, campus branding, things of that nature that may impact student choice, community view of the value of the university and stuff like that?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think, it's again, as a marketing professor, I know brands are important, right? We may not like corporate words as faculty members, but we are a brand. West Georgia is a brand, which is a mix of many things. It's what students study in classes. It means what the dining experience is. It means what housing is like. It means what the facilities are like, how the environment looks. So it's all of these things, right? And so all of these things matter. I'll tell you one thing that I've already asked my folks to look at, because one of my initial reactions, having met people, staff members in different areas, is that we have some really, really good, committed staff members. At the same time, we need more connectivity between different areas. And one of those areas is communication, right? Which to me is not just like what you talk, it's what you have, how the campus looks. It's kind of what are you communicating about yourself to others in some fashion, whether it's through words, whether it's through sculptures, whether it's through anything else, right? Because I do see that there are lots of smart people, but how do we bring them together? Because when we're trying to do this D1 elevation in all respects, we aren't going to have all the resources to do everything, right? So we have to pick, but we have to push in the same direction. And I'm actually trying to do it in other areas too, which is, it could be fiscal, it could be any other area in which things are kind of spread across. And so to me, that's what kind of integrated communications is, right? It's how you make everything seem similar. Like I've been asking for, kind of, hey, what's the book it's called like a brand book, which is like who we are, What font sizes do we use? What exact colors do we use? And why are we deviating for this? Why is this thing looking differently from this thing? Well, because this one is in that unit, this one is in athletics, this one is in advancement, and this one is in a college, right? So to me, all of these things are critical, but because that's how you together kind of create a unified image, a unified impression. Again, not because we, like I said, we have some amazing people. I've been just so impressed with how hard our staff members work and like including on weekends and so on with games and everything going on. But for us as an organization to progress and with limited resources, it is going to need a lot of the, with a computer science expert, I've been using computer science metaphors. So it's like, you have the chips you have. We have CPUs, we don't have the NVIDIA expensive GPUs. So, but how do you create the right architecture, the networks, so that with the CPUs we have, we can do the big things we want to accomplish, right? Without burning out, right? So it's kind of without heating up the system. How do we form the right connections so that we can get the most of what we have? And to me, not an easy thing, but one big thing is going to be forming those networks, forming those connections in all respects. Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Thank you for coming. I'm Gavin, the criminology. I've just checked parabolic. If you ChatGPT parabolic and soccer, it tells you about Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. So that doesn't say it's nothing that. Sorry for rudely texting you. So we're 40% and the state average and the national average is 60. So we've got we're going to kick it up a bit. And you mentioned that you sort of restated what we all know, our students are great. So is there anything that we are seeing when we're reaching out to the students that may not have got to that graduation? Is there anything thematic that we can know about and therefore do something to actually hit the nature of that problem exactly rather than doing things at random? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And some of those things are honestly, as faculty outside of the control, right? Financial aid is a big one. Many of them come with a hope they need to maintain a GPA of 3.0. They fall short on that, and then they feel it's not worth it. In fact, I was asking folks for some data on what happens for hope and not hope. Those were paying their own way. So there are some of those things which kind of are hard, though. Although even for those things, because students don't know who to talk with, right? So they may talk to you and say, hey, I would love to take this class, but I'm below a 3.0, I can't afford this, right? It can be, you will be the first point of contact for many people. So one thing I would say is, it could be financial aid, it could be health reasons, it could be something else happening in their family, or it could be like, I found a new job, and it's paying $20 an hour, I don't need to spend money here, right? So it is, I feel, one is kind of telling the stories, the value of education, whether on the dollar side, whether on the purpose meaning side. The other is, if you don't have an answer, not just letting them go and say, oh, I don't need financial aid, but instead, maybe take that extra 5 minutes and say, well, this is, I don't know, but let me check on the website and and just call someone and talk to them, right? Sometimes because sometimes when there are problems like these, you don't want them to take a quick decision. You want, take them through. But the other one, as I was saying earlier, honestly, the big one is what happens in a classroom, right? How you make people feel that, because we have an awesome product to sell, right? So this is something economically, intellectually, meaning-wise, it's just something which we know how wonderful education is, right? And I think the more we can, but we don't usually sell that because we're like, of course, education is wonderful. Who doesn't think education is wonderful, right? So it's like if you love soccer, you're like, of course, who doesn't think soccer is wonderful, right? So, and I said it because you sounded European. So,
No, I'm born in Mississippi.
So, and also because I saw you have something in Hindi here. Sebastian, is that what it is?
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
Yeah, my father was born in Nottingham.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
You know what they're famous for?
Orange?
Yes. Yes. That's in India. So, so, so it is kind of how do we explicitly, again, I'm a lot on like articulating things for people and not just like, of course, it's important. And let's just move on. Sometimes we have to spend time on, this is important and this is why. Sometimes you have to spend time on, I can't do this for you. I'm sorry you're failing this class, but I'm gonna spend 30 minutes with you instead of writing them off because everyone needs second chances. I don't know about you guys, I've had a tough time during my undergrad. I failed classes and honestly, I didn't like academics for a long time. Honestly, it was kind of the PhD where I finally, it's a long story, but the short version is I didn't want to do a PhD. My wife wanted to, and we were married. And so I was like, okay, I'll go with you for a while and then I'll quit because I don't like academics, right? So that was the plan. But then, and I had done my MBA by then and I'd worked a couple of years. So I was all like means to an end. Academics to me was never like something I was enjoying. But then I did the PhD and my wife was like, when are you quitting? When are you quitting? And I was like, let's just give me one more semester because I really started enjoying. For the first time in my life, I was, I was really enjoying what I was taking lots of classes. I was in business school, but when you're doing, I'm a consumer psychologist, most of my classes were in the psychology department or the statistics department. These were the two main ones I had. And so I was like loving all classes I was taking and it was fun. And not to mention, the American system is also very liberal on grades. So I was getting good grades for the first time. So it was just a great experience. And I kind of fell in love, even when that wasn't my intention. Well, I first fell in love with my wife, who made me fall in love with academia. So you never know. The point I'm making is that I failed classes in my undergraduate degree, and even for my MBA, if you ask my friends, they were all like horrified. What are you doing with a PhD, right? And even more horrified now. Like, how did they make you president? So it is. Everyone needs second chances. And we have seen, and honestly, my own experience has made me a better teacher because I've had kids who, it's very easy to write them off, but I would always think about myself. And because unfortunately, not unfortunately, in some ways, it's fortunate that most people in academia have had great academic credentials, right? So it's kind of, like I studied, I got good grades, and that's what my life was. You can study and you can get good grades. I think I was more of an aberration in which I did not have a great academic record. So when in my class people didn't do well, I would again think of myself and be like, no, I did okay. I think I can give them another chance. I think I can do more things. I think I can tell them what I just told you, that, hey, this happened to me too, and I'm your professor. So, just so life can change. It again comes back to growth mindset and so on. And it's not to say that it's not like everyone can do everything. But there are things which we can do, right? We can be good at some things, and finding that, helping students with that perspective. Because honestly, we can do whatever we want in presidents and provosts and staff, but what all will eventually matter is what they're doing in the classroom and the conversation that no one listens to, right? It's like no one is watching when you're having those one-on-one with students. But those are the conversations that are changing lives, one life at a time. It's changing someone and then their families, then the economy, right? So it's kind of everything together. So to me, that's the, just listening and just referring them to people, being aware of other resources. And sometimes it can be as simple as like if you tell them, well, go to the website, we have a financial aid office. They may not do that. But if you take the extra step and you Google in front of them and you say, you know what, this is it. Do you want me to make a call? These two are very different scenarios because now it tells them, okay, someone took that effort. Maybe I can at least give them a call, right? So, I mean, it's to me, it's small steps like those. Other questions, thoughts, comments? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Nina from Higher Ed. Thank you for sharing all the statistics and graduation is especially across the institutions. So when you share these statistics, it kind of gets our brain thinking on why some institutions are able to bounce back from COVID, let's say. And so can you share some insight on how institutions were able to do that and possibly ways that we could adapt some things that other institutions have done?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is, I was talking about the momentum approach with mindsets and purpose and pathways. Many institutions actually, it's been done well here too. But I think we can do more on that. And coupled with, which is kind of a related idea. I don't know how many of you are familiar with NIST at Georgia State. That's the National Institute of Student Success. It's kind of a national model for how do you achieve student success. And many in the best places we have in the system, it's been a mix of things happening on the momentum approach, coupled with the NIST work in which they kind of do a whole analysis. It's much broader. It's kind of the systems and everything that goes. It's not just the academic side. Sometimes it's with the right software, right? With the right technology. You have EAB and we have this, and you get early alerts or you inform people. It's kind of those processes as well. Those ones do really well. The good news is we do have, and this happened kind of while I was in the system office, we worked with NIST and we actually gave them some money from the system office to work with several of our institutions and eventually everyone. And West Georgia is in the first cohort, so they will be working closely with West Georgia as well. So I'm really optimistic about it. But at the same time, they're like consultants who come in and they'll tell us what we need to do. But then again, it depends on, what we do, right? And it's simple things. It's like if we have reporting grades, right? So we look at grades, we have a midterm, and we take our time to do grades. It makes a big difference if you give them results early, right? So they can plan, they can start preparing for the next time. If someone is falling through the cracks, are we using an early warning? I'm sure we have that in our systems. Are we using that early warning, right? So again, a lot of it is, there are things which we may not even think as faculty members, right? We may not think of it as a big deal, but for a student, their timeline is they have midterm, they have a withdrawal date. They are thinking, what do I do here? Do I drop out? Is there a chance I'll stay? And one thing, for example, we did a few months ago from the system office, we extended the withdrawal date a bit so that students, because many students were quitting early thinking they're not doing well, even when they were. Even they could have passed the class, but there was a withdrawal date, so they had to decide. And so we extended it a bit to the extent possible so that, let them actually see that they're just not able to, perform in that class. So it is kind of those kinds of things. They're kind of a mix of technology with momentum, with NIST, and then the actual work that goes on. Yes.
Sarah Elias Music. So I just wanted to loop back a little bit, talking about communication. So in departments or programs that have to rely a little bit more heavily on part-time and adjunct faculty, and I think most of us have probably been in those roles at some point. But we're talking as full-time faculty and what we're going to do in the classroom. Well, how are we going to translate and communicate to our part-time faculty that, yes, you are not going to probably have the same one-on-one interaction, like they're coming to you asking questions, but still creating that environment where students feel cared about and are going to perform well in those types of situations. Is there going to be some sort of oversight that we're going to make sure that part-time faculty are going to have that same sort of environment in their classroom to foster that?
I don't think the provost has something to say on that.
Yeah, thanks for raising that. And in particular, depending on the discipline, you've got very focused expertise in music and other areas. So it's important to recognize that diversity of faculty in that mix. On the other hand, the USG provides significant guidance to make sure we're not undermining the professoriate and getting in balance there. So to your question about how do we make sure that everybody involved, whether it's staff, full-time, part-time, are engaged in that. One, I would start with course templates. It's it's onerous to hire a part-time faculty and say, here's a blank sheet, figure it out. Maybe a course outcomes. So having very clear syllabi that we can hand over, if we truly are leaning into common course components and have the course encoded into D2L, that's not so that we can automate that and remove full-time faculty and kind of undermine the institution. It's so that when we need an extra section because of growth or because of flexibility in part-time, we can hand that over cleanly and say, this entire course is very well developed. The second element of that is how do we provide mentorship between our full-time and our part-time faculty and say, you're not alone, and here is the UWG culture. And here is what has worked for me, whether you're a new full-time faculty or whether you're a new part-time faculty, having that mentorship and that support, having someone you can call, text and say, hey, here's the situation, or, but it flows both directions. It's not just when there's a question, it's also checking in on new people and saying, what's going on, how's it going, and how can I mentor you? Ideally, part-time is a great way of people testing the waters in both directions. And if we're growing and if you've got new opportunity, and we've seen this, in multiple institutions that I know we've all been at, those often turn into limited term and then turn into tenure track positions. So it's a wise investment. We should not treat part-time faculty as a mercenary. You're just coming in, you're dropping in, you're teaching, and you're out. Let's bring them into our community well.
But it's but this point is that you made is actually true even for part-time staff members, where then it becomes like you have to, because they don't have the time to, they don't have the months to kind of figure out form connections. So you quickly have to get, I mean, think of me, I'm coming in as interim, that's what I started out with. You don't have time to like, okay, talk to 100 people, figure out the strategy and do this. You kind of have to start working, right? So, but in my role, of course, as president, it's easier for me to quickly get whoever I want and say, tell me more about this, because I need to get working. When you're a part-time faculty member or staff member, you don't have that privilege. So we have to look out for those, both faculty and staff, and offer that support so that they can make progress. And I think, like the provost was saying, kind of having some of those standard templates, or sometimes it can be course captains, depending on the kind of course, who can have broad guidance, can be helpful. But thanks, that's a real issue. Other thoughts, comments, questions? Dylan is like, you've spoken too long. You need to get off the stage. Well, thank you. Thanks for. I'm just gonna stay for a bit more, but then I'll have to go for something else.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having us out. Always enjoy coming to Faculty Senate, and I start, as I always do, by thanking you for the work that you do. That I'll echo what I said in August when we came to the general faculty meeting. We never stop. So even though this is the first Faculty Senate meeting, although we can count the general faculty as, we had a piece for the Faculty Senate there. Yes, this is the start of the fall, and lovely that it actually starts feeling like fall outside, right? Lower humidity. So I appreciate the investment that you make and the representation that you all bring on behalf of the faculty in this work. Appreciate Dylan coming in and kind of giving some questions that had come up. And please pass those on either directly to me or to him or to Laura about what are you interested in using this time to really dive into. And I'd like to take just a few moments to address some of those that have come up. First is a follow-on, the working group that we formed last year looking at service load and how that is pretty onerous, right? We did an inventory, we crowdsourced this to deans and chairs and said, what are all the different committees at an institution level and at a college and department level that are required to maintain? And that's important to have representation, to make sure that if there's an institutional committee that we've got voice from the various schools and colleges. But if you do some quick math, it adds up really, really quickly. And understand that that takes quite a bit of time, where you want to be focusing on other important items, in particular, service to your disciplines as well. So it's not just service on committees and the work at UWG, it's also holistic around I'm engaged in music and criminology, and I need to represent in my discipline at conferences and organizing. So we will be working on that as this academic year progresses, but I wanted to set the stage for this year about that as important work and really tie it more broadly into workload across. So it's not just service, but of course, scholarship, creative activity and research and teaching. And what does that look like? We had good conversations last year around, 3-3, 4-4 percentages. And I think, Jeff, you had a whiteboard exercise with some mathematics up here, where it adds up to be more than 100. And as Ashwani mentioned, we go into this because we have a passion to serve and to invest in our students and our community. So I would challenge anyone to say, I know that you're doing more than 100. And that's appropriate, but when it gets to like 200 or 250%, that becomes a challenge. I recognize that, and I put that before us this upcoming academic year to really dive into that and say, committee work across institutions, and it's not unique to UWG, but committee work across institutions is like the tax code. It's added to, but it's never removed. And let's use this year to really review that and say, what do we need to be focused on? How do we ensure representation? But can we trust our colleagues to say, I might not be in the room, but I have faith that this is being handled well, and maybe bring and tamp some of that down to free us for the important work ahead of us. I'll lean into that fourth pillar that the USG has added recently, that student success element. And I'll share, of course, as you know, that UWG's approach was to embed that across all of the different areas that are already in our annual reviews and in our pre and post and our P&T reviews. I'll give you a small example of that. Speaking of fall and it finally feeling like fall a little bit. Last night, great opportunity to go out and visit the band. Kale Self does a great job of this. And at the end of it, they sounded great. They were moving around the field. It's a great energy. If you get a chance on Thursday nights, if you haven't walked the Greenbelt around there, it's a wonderful opportunity, especially when the fall weather hits. But at the end of that, brought everybody together, and Kale Self said, okay, you all are in control of your decisions. Make good choices, take care of each other, take care of yourself. And in that small moment, he was leaning into that student success. It wasn't about hitting the right note or hitting the mark on the field. It was meta. It was talking about, you can be successful, and here are the things that we need to do as a community to invest in each other and make sure that we're successful. And I know that those students took that because of that investment that he makes in them. And I share that with you because every one of you are doing that, and all of the faculty across UWG are doing that really well. How can we double and triple dip? And as you're articulating, I know many of you are doing your P&T and spent a lot of time over the summer putting those packets together. Look forward to seeing that process and reviewing them later this academic year. That's just a tip of the iceberg, right? You all are doing this in micro ways, hundreds of times every day. And to the president's point, we can either move these students closer to or further away. Good example, last weekend, you're filling out the engagement reports. And this is a federal mandate because I've been in the USG long enough to remember when we didn't do this and students were taking out federal loans and actually never come to class. And then the institution's on the hook for, well, you admitted 100 students that were never engaged. And didn't you do any kind of due diligence? You were just throwing money at them and putting the federal government on the hook for the loans. This is why we do these forms. And it's proper and appropriate that we do because of potential bad acting. But for someone who doesn't fill that form out, and a couple of deans and I were chasing down a few, and it could have been a computer error, it could have been some, faculty member just didn't get it and didn't see the importance of it. 16 students were going to be dropped from their classes on Monday because of not filling these out. We intervened and we figured it out, but it's, cleaning that up is a big mess. So no matter how small the activity, it always contributes to, and I'm looking forward to this next portion of the Faculty Senate talking about all of these micro things. The question of what do we do? How do we engage, and what difference can faculty make? You all do that, whether it's a beautiful almost fall night in band and encouraging students, or even doing some of the mundane things about checking off saying yes, they're engaged. But also want to lean into utilizing technology. We've talked a lot about Common Core components and utilizing D2L and syllabi. not only can we replicate courses for part-time and other, but automating this. One of our success measures is we have a 97% rate where faculty are reporting on whether students are engaged or, successful or not, and do we need to intervene and should they withdraw and so forth. Appreciate the opportunity to kind of push back the withdrawal date, but I'd love to know in week 3, if a student didn't turn something in, they should be reminded and faculty should be prompted. And utilizing computing, if we have it in D2L cleanly, then we can automate a lot of this and take that off the backs of faculty to fill out forms and say, yes, the student is passing or not. That's basic stuff computers should be able to run pretty quickly. So leveraging that technology intelligently and allowing you to focus on the meat of teaching and engaging in those students. So we'll be addressing service load and student success and graduation this semester. The last element I'd like to lean into, and it's something that Jeff prompted me over the summer when we met. Faculty are asking about faculty leave. You know, the USG policy due on December 1st every year. And we've had a number of discussions around this. This won't be the first time you hear me say it. I really don't like that phrasing. That's the policy and we'll use it, but it's not leave. Faculty are not leaving and not doing the work. And from an optics perspective, that's really tough to sell to a public that's scrutinizing and appropriately asking, what are we doing with the resources that we have? So I'll lean into this again and say, you're not leaving. If you put a request in like that, you're doing different work. You have a unique opportunity to research, to do on-site work that you couldn't do if you were teaching 3 or 4 classes in service here on campus. So yes, it's part of the USG policy and it's once every 7 years by the details of that, but I would encourage you to think more flexibly than that. And I'll point to Janet Gens on this in biology. She is giving a talk right now. Actually, it might be over because we're after 2 o'clock, but at 1 o'clock today, she was giving a talk based on the lead that she did in Brazil last year. So great opportunity to go down and look at, I'm gonna mess this up, but it's chemical impact on the Amazonian rainforest. And I'm sure the biologist, I was a physics person, apologies, right? But for the biologist in the room, it's impactful, it's incredibly impactful work. She's presenting this afternoon on that. And yes, it was part of this leave policy, but it was never Janet going off and not doing work. It was impactful, bringing that back as expertise, enriching the classroom experience for her students, and actually has parlayed that into a Fulbright this upcoming year. And the question that Renee brought out of CMCS was, well, are they eligible because, was gone here and do we have to wait a year by policy? I want to make sure everyone is familiar with this idea of flexible workload. If you have an opportunity in spring of 25 to write a grant or to work on a manuscript, you don't need to wait 7 years before you can do that. Approach your chair, approach your dean, approach me, please, and say, here's the opportunity, here's the ROI, here's what the cost would be, and please don't say no cost. All right, because if you say, oh, we can cover this, no problem, then the question everyone should be asking is, well, then why are you teaching what you're teaching if there's no impact if you're not doing it, right? So clearly there's going to be a cost, either backfilling or your colleagues taking on additional work in classes. But everybody should be thinking creatively about, I can step away from the norm of just 30% in scholarship and 10% in service and 60% in teaching on a per term basis. If you see an opportunity, I'm very interested in that, and I've been conveying this to all of the deans. They should be interested in it, and I hope that you'll bring that forward. That yes, we've got the USG policy. It does say leave, but I recognize, and I hope everyone understands, you're not leaving and vacating the position. You're shifting what your focus is for that term. So I leave that with you, and I point out both Cale and Janet as great examples. I know we've got a lot of Cales and Janets across the institution in different disciplines. You all do great work, and I'm excited to see where we're headed this year. Any questions on any of that or anything that I haven't covered that came up, Dylan? Yes.
So we've had a workload task force just last year. And so I'm really curious about the information that was collected, the data. Do you have any initial findings so far from the data?
I do, and I'm happy to share it, but it needs to be normalized.
Okay.
And so I'll give you an example. CAXI, which I know is now 2 colleges, reported the number of spots on committees across the college and in all departments within that college. There are 953 spots of service required, various committees. In contrast, let's say we're in Roy Richards Hall, so we'll go with Richards College of Business, 128 spots. To me, and for faculty in both of those areas, I think there's that discrepancy means that there's probably some variance in how CAXI interpreted the questions and how Richards College interpreted the questions. So I want to go back to the deans and the chairs and say, okay, this is the data we've collected, but we need to do a deeper dive and make sure that either Richards College is not forgetting about some things that they're doing, or that CAXI was looking at service inclusive of to the discipline and other things. But just real high level, we're looking at 1,774 spots of service, meaning we need 1,774 faculty spots across all of these. And then the number of hours, self-reported again, was 18,624. You can divide that, not by 20, because that would assume we're all 12, 12 months and so forth. That's tremendous, right? And so I think the takeaway, the meta takeaway is that there are a lot of spots and there's a lot of work and a lot of ask of people, and we need to adjust that.
So in relationship to that, or, just going through it, I have a few other questions. So definitely you mentioned that committee work is not our only service that we do.
Correct.
There's so much. And I know within those spreadsheets, a lot more was reported than just committee activity. I know that there's not equity in terms of how faculty approach committee work or their desire to be on committees. In terms of, and this may not be data that you have at hand, but will we see in the future data related to that actual service that we actually have to do, whether it's, for example, those that are in teacher certification programs, some faculty are on the road going to schools constantly, plus they're also teaching a full load. And there's been noted inequity in terms of how different units handle that. In terms of some units hire a specific person that's all they do. And then there's a faculty that's an instructor of record of that internship course that never goes on the road. Whereas there are instructors of record that are on the road, sometimes all day.
Yes.
Weekly. But then other things such as like music will bring students on campus that are potential students for different events. And that is service, and that falls into recruitment, that also falls into student success, that falls into retention for current UWG students. So will this collection of data, information move into pulling that out?
Yes.
Finding those things that if we have a certain amount of hours that folks are committed across campus, just committees, to also understand what the additional amount of service hours are that are on top of that.
Yes.
Push those hours even further.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and that's why I share this preliminarily, but it really hasn't been shaken down to be meaningful. In that I think that there's actually more than this, as high as this sounds. You talk about service, well, I go on a Saturday and I'm here for new student orientation, or I'm helping with move-in. And all of this is enumerated typically in your annual reviews, and you're collating this down. But it's probably even larger than we're self-reporting. And I don't say that to say we need to stop doing these things. I'm saying that to say we need to prioritize. And much of the service, in particular in committees, is self-imposed. And it really disadvantages smaller units that, 5 people are called to be represented on 50 committees, whereas a larger unit, 100 people are called to be on 50 committees. So it bears really an important analysis. And we've got just the beginning of it. And I think it's an important element that we tackle, always with that student success in mind. And I mean, let's be real. I've been on many committees where it meets once a semester and all we do is sit in a room and chat about something, but there's never any outcome from it. Not here, of course, right? But that was something that might have been brilliant 10 years ago and it's outlived its need. So just because it's on the books doesn't mean it needs to be on the books come FY 25, 26.
And then one final question.
Yes.
I definitely know this is gonna take a while to collect data and kind of process it. Do you anticipate in the future, once everything is coming to a completion with this survey, this investigation, steps that might be taken to start to bring equity to faculty workload?
Yes, not only in reducing expectations where appropriate, but then giving acknowledgement and resources where this is necessary and make sure that there is equity across the different colleges and schools.
Thank you.
Yes,
Could you give an update on the campus AI policy, please?
campus AI. And I think we've got the expert in the room here, right? Front and center. I think where we landed on that was that we need to recognize, and correct me please, but what I took away from this is that we need to acknowledge it. And that in the syllabus, faculty have a couple of different choices on how they're handling it. But to be clear about that, and if someone says this is banned altogether, that needs to be clear. If it is, this is used, but it's assistive, but don't turn in anything that the AI has generated, that needs to be clear. Or, hey, barn doors wide open, do whatever you'd like. You need to be, I've got my assessment measures in a way where I'm gonna know whether you really know this or not, or if this was just AI generated. We've got an AI workshop next week or week after, I think, that you're leading at a system level. And so this is an ongoing area of importance, but at UWG, it's important to recognize being clear from day one. And then also being humble as faculty that if we're using, not only can students use AI, but then faculty use AI. And one of the good works that came out of the IFE and this group looking at it was we as faculty need to be humble and not just put work into, and if we get a positive that there was some cheating or this was generatively made, that we don't run with that without critically examining it. So let's give due process to students. And to the straw that finally said, okay, I'm out. Many of the things that I'm hearing is students saying, I didn't use AI or I used Grammarly and I was falsely accused. This was actually my work and give me a chance to not get a 0 or an F in the class and the time to do grade appeal or to appeal that. We're also looking at shrinking that. I understand we need time to do due diligence there, but if I'm a student and I get an F in a class because you say I used generative AI and cheated, well, that might either crush my graduation or I can't get into the next course. And so there's some pretty significant ramifications of false positives. And so let's use a soft hand when we're using this.
Question is it formalized and is it in now the student handbook?
It has been shared.
Yeah, so if I may, we're gonna have, so last year we had a task force that was working on that. And my understanding is that legal had to get involved, so one of the announcements I want to bring to the Senate in a few minutes is. Last week we discussed, we're just gonna reignite that task force and kind of dive back into this issue because it's a live issue and it's constantly changing. So TBD on some of this.
I'll give a shameless plug here that we're having student AI literacy workshops in the library during World AI Week, October 7 through 11. And so we hope all of you will send your students to these workshops.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's what recommendations came out of and were published by IFE. So look to those, or Relitza, I know you've done some work in this. And so if you've got a question or if it's not in your syllabus currently, I recommend you revisit that and address this explicitly with your students. Don't leave it to chance. Yes.
So just on that question, thank you for that. When we had a meeting, I think last year, an AI, Provost AI work group, I shamelessly lifted Georgia Tech's 4 options. And they were the options that we came away with. And Dr. Akins said, if I'm misspeaking, then let me know, but I did cite them, by the
Yes.
way, so it's copyright infringement, rather than plagiarism, but so that was, they were four of the choices, I know it's a live issue, but I did thought, we thought, why reinvent the wheel at a clever flow, but that's where it is at the moment. I don't know whether it's gone to legal yet, and I know Dylan wants to continue.
Well, we pushed it out publicly
Yeah.
as advisory to faculty to utilize. It's not policy. And one of the challenges there is as soon as we put it as policy, we'll need to modify it every other month, right? So I think approaching it in the spirit of student support and acknowledging that this is out there and that it can cut both ways is important. If we stick with that, it's hard to go wrong.
Question,
Great question. Yes.
the sociology faculty member wants to know what the provost is doing about the faculty parking situation on academic squad because they don't have enough spots and insufficient spots for parking, even though provost wants everybody on campus.
I think we all want people on campus. That's not a singular ask. And I'm happy to follow up with that with facilities about options. We have spots that might be a bit further in the past, given some construction, but there are ample spots across campus. So happy to dive deeper into that. And if there's a specific whether it's an accessibility need or if there's a specific concern, I'm happy to chat about that. Yes.
I have a comment about the course reports that just came out. I appreciate that. That was really good. My class meets once a week for 3 hours, so there's a drop down you have to pick while you're concerned. So if I had a student that missed 2 days out of 3, I was concerned, but the option was only 5 days. So could we tweak that response to be excessive or something?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mark that note. We have to leave that box.
But to you, it's whether the student is engaged or not, and is there a risk? The purpose of this isn't to get, down to the hundredths place. It's which students should we be reaching out to and who is at risk and who should we be, talking with from an advising perspective. Again, I'd love to get to where you're not having to do this drop down at all. We've got more intelligent queries and maybe they're attending class, but they're not turning anything in.
Yeah, that was an option. I did mark that.
Right.
But for absenteeism, I only had to pay 5 times.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I'm taking a note and I'll follow up on that. Good question. Others? I know we're over time, but if you do have a follow-up, please reach out to me or catch me before we leave the building here. But again, I'll say thank you for your work, not only on Faculty Senate, but across the institution. You all make the difference and determine student success and graduation. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I was gonna begin by saying this is probably the shortest agenda we've had in our history, and therefore we're off to a slow start, but I actually don't think so. So this is, at least for me, what I value about Senate, have come to value the most about Senate. It has a lot to do with what we've spent the last hour and a half doing, so I hope that you all also find value in this. Nonetheless, we do have some other business to attend to. And I do know, speaking of the short agenda, this is not going to be a consistent thing. There's a lot that's coming down the pike. Quickly, there are some important things to know about Curriculog. So if David could come up very briefly to give you an overview on that.
Good afternoon. Just a brief update on Curriculog. And these details are will be in the Senate minutes, so you can share those with your colleges and schools. Curriculog is now active. And we already have a number of programs that are submitting course proposals and program proposals into Curriculog. If you're having any trouble with those, let us know, and we can help troubleshoot those for you. There are a few different deadlines this year for Curriculog. If you're submitting a proposal for anything that needs University System of Georgia or SAC's notification or approval, those need to be on the Senate agenda by no later than the January meeting. If you've got questions about those, and those are typically just program, program revisions or new programs, typically doesn't involve courses. But if you got questions about that, let us know and we can kind of talk with you about that. By the March meeting, we need to have all of the proposals, course proposals and other proposals that come to the faculty senate for approval. And then we'll have an April deadline for anything that just goes straight to the provost. Those are typically changes in like a course name or learning outcomes, something like that. We've done this because last year we ran into a good many problems with things being submitted really, really late that we then had to send forward to either the USG or the SACs. There were some significant delays in that. We won't need those delays, and we have to have everything in place for the catalog to go active in July. So this will help us in that process because it takes time to get those things through the USG and SAC. So sometimes take a good bit of time. So those are the main things. You'll also notice in curriculum that USG has some new definitions related to program and course modalities. Those are included there as well for you to look at. But if you've got questions about those, let us know. But those are the new definitions that we'll be using in curriculum, and we need to make sure that we are consistent with those and our information we're sharing about our programs on our websites. Dylan, thank you.
Thank you. I know when I first learned about this, I immediately told my program, let's just get it done this fall. Let's get it going. Another quick announcement, the Help West Employee Benevolence Fund Committee is looking for a volunteer. Traditionally, the Senate has a member that sits on this committee. So Julia, I think, is here. So if you want to get in touch with Julia Farmer and me, if you're interested in serving in this capacity, my understanding from her is that this is not a significant lift. It is another service work, right? We all get that. That's a topic of conversation. But this committee does really good work. And most of this would just involve electronically approving requests to help. So if you want to add anything else, you're welcome to.
Just to confirm, it is very. I refer a request to the committee and they vote on a smart sheet. Whatever to approve it, we do meet occasionally to check in, but not what you do when you can't make a meeting, that's not what you do either, but we really do need somebody to vote in. At the very least,
Yeah, the Senate should have representation on this. So if you're interested in serving, please let me know and Julie know. All right. I want to talk about the task force. If you were on Senate last year, familiar with Senate, we developed this idea of Senate-wide task groups. And briefly, the philosophy behind these is that the Senate is going to have a need to address issues that span our committee system's capability to house within a particular committee, or are just important enough that the Senate as a whole wants to have an involvement on. So we had a number of these last year. The executive committee and I discussed last week, hey, what's still alive? What should we keep going? And the two that really came to the fore that we should absolutely continue with have already come up today. So they clearly remain important. In no particular order, one deals with all things AI, and the A is academic, the I is integrity, and the A is artificial, and the I is intelligence. So these are two different things, but related things. I want to be clear on that. So we called it the Academic Integrity Task Force because this is an umbrella thing, right? It's not just artificial intelligence that we're dealing with. It's the old school plagiarism, is all of the things. So in his role as past chair, Jeff has volunteered to help us with these working groups. So he's a good point of contact for this. Also, we had Gavin and we had Laura working on that AI task force. So if you would like to be involved with that, I strongly encourage you to get in touch with them and get in touch with me. And we have a lot more work to do with that. The AI policy, other issues that are constantly coming to the fore. We just need to be able to take a leadership role on that. So if you want to be involved with all things AI, pick your A, pick your I. Let's do it. The other big one is workload. So Jason Swift has been involved in the workload task force, and he's indicated a desire to continue that, as Jeff is happy to jump in on this one as well. this is workload in terms of how many classes we're teaching and what's that look like all across campus. It is also service burden and all things related. We hope that as a Senate, we can work collaboratively with the provost's office and tackle this issue. And as far as I'm concerned, I think all things should be on the table. And as the Senate chair, by all things on the table, I include Senate organization and structure and committee structure in that as well. So I hope that this working group is something that interests you. I hope you're willing to put your name forward to join the work that Jason and Jeff and some folks were already involved last semester. If you were involved in one of these task forces last semester, please get in touch with me and affirm, hey, I still want to be involved with this so I can send your info to these relevant people, but also please step forward. If you're on a committee that some of our committees are busier than others, you know, so if you're on UPC, maybe you're just going to do UPC stuff for the Senate. If you're on some of these other committees, maybe you have a little bit more time on your hands and you want to get involved in one of these task force. That's also a reason why we innovated this task force idea. So just please, let's get in touch. And if other things come to our agenda, and I think they will, over the course of this semester, we'll have additional task forces. But for right now, if you want to be involved in workload, if you're passionate about that, anything AI, you're passionate about that, please get in touch and let's dive in. All right. Do any of the committee chairs have anything that they want to bring to the group right now? I just want to give an opportunity for that. On the committee front, I know we have some new senators here. So the Senate is a 3-year appointment. It's a 3-year term. You all are assigned to committees or you will be assigned to committees. With more about that in just a minute if you're a new senator. In order to share the burden of this service, leading these committees in particular, it works best if for at least one of those 3 years, you can put your name forward and say, hey, I will lead this committee for a year. So I want to personally stand up here and plug you. If you haven't done that yet, please lean into that. Please take that leadership role on. Some of our committee chairs, a lot of our committee chairs have been doing it for much more than 1 year. They will all be asking for successors this coming year. They will all be asking for chair-elects. When they do that, strongly encourage you to put your name forward for that earlier rather than later. Your life will be easier getting up to speed as a committee chair if you spend a year as a chair-elect. Just want to plug that. So with that, I want to go ahead and Laura wants to briefly show you some updates on the website.
So as you all know, Sonia Adams is amazing, and she is the one who's in charge of actually making the edits to the Senate website. But we send her the information for that. I do, and committee chairs do as well. So I just wanted to let you know that to the best of our knowledge, the website has been updated. So you'll be able to see the Senate meetings. Those have been posted for a while, but you'll also be able to see the committee compositions, so that if you have constituents that need to get in touch with a particular chair, or if they have questions, that correct information is available now. So you'll be able to see that. If you are a senator and you are a new senator and you have not chosen what committee you want to be on, that's something that I'll send out an email to you later today to ask which committee you would like to be on. It would be great if you could prioritize looking at committees that have an open spot, because those are committees that need additional representation, particularly by senators. If you are already serving as a senator in a committee and you would like to switch to a different committee, or if you do have the desire to perhaps become a chair-elect in another committee, we welcome and appreciate that as well. So it's something to consider. But I wanted to let you know all of this as well, so that the standing committees have also been updated. And just as a reminder for the website, this is also where you find the agendas and minutes. And then if you need to see the president's replies, those are usually embedded within this little side over here. And it's also going to be where you will find the newsletters when we launch those in the coming academic year as well.
Thank you. Don't want to leave any part of the agenda behind. So is there any old business that anyone has to bring to the? Okay, so as appropriate, I'm not gonna commit to every meeting, but as appropriate, I think, a great thing that we innovated last year was using the time we have in this room together to do what, as faculty, we do best, really just wrap our minds around some ideas and talk through some of the issues that we're confronting as a campus community. So today, my thought was with the time that we have left, let's lean into what our president has suggested should be important to all of us, and how do we get our students across the finish line? So with the time we have left, let's focus on that. Let's think about what within our control, ideally, right? So he rightly mentioned that as faculty, there is a great deal of this project problem that is just, it's not within our control. What within our control can we do? Are we doing to address this problem? One of the things that I think is very valuable about Senate is nearly every program on campus is represented in this room right now. And we all do those micro things that were just referred to that help get our students across the finish line. So what I want to encourage you to do, and we can spend, I want to be able to come back together and share these ideas, and we can spend maybe 10 minutes just with those around you, brag on you and brag on your colleagues. What do you do to get those students across the finish line that would be worth sharing with one another, that would be worth knowing? And I know sometimes we can have these conversations, and I've been there myself, and I say, well, what is the point of sitting here and talking about these things? Well, for this particular conversation, what I want to submit to you is the point of this dialogue starts with you, and it starts the second you walk out this door. Because in this room, in the next 20 minutes, you will hear about something that can help our students get to that finish line, and you can walk out and you can implement it in your own classes, or you can share it with your colleagues and help them implement it. It's possible that we might learn of something that has a Senate we can build on. Maybe there should be a policy thing, and if so, we can deal with that. But at minimum, we're going to learn about some good ideas. So just go ahead and with the folks that are around you, feel free to move around the room to mix it up. But I'm going to watch this 10 minutes. I'll come back to you at 1:50. I guess 2:50 at this point. Sorry. I'll come back to you and we'll bring it together as a group, and I'll ask you to share some of your ideas.
It's not.
What about it?
They're all gonna see the same line.
Yeah, those are the things I because right now. But I can get anybody.
Yeah, it's we don't just buy
Let's put that.
And it gets us straight. And the first one, and they're already. Because once they get through the top, and just try to. Are the students actually
All right, if you throw it.
It's like here to be hard to do. Yeah. It's all great.
Alright, bring it back together.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hope that we improved the author, good idea by this point. I know I heard some walking around the room. So what I want to do, just with the few minutes we have left, my commitment to you, unless there is an amazingly good reason to not do so, we will end all of these meetings at 2 o'clock on the dot. So, if we can get just a handful, what were some of the great ideas you heard today? So Laura, can you get those things down into the minutes so we can get them on the record? Need some volunteers. I know I heard some good ones, so I will call you out.
Leveraging internships and experiential learning opportunities as required components.
Okay. Required components in the curriculum? Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's some difference across campus in how we do that, so absolutely. The need for that. Yeah.
Said you would like to have more specific data if it's possible from students who are either dissatisfied currently on the pathway of being a potential graduate or after they leave. So I mentioned financial aid and the small teaching that we do every day, but it would be interesting if we had more survey reports so that we're not like trying to fix all the holes in the house, and maybe there's just one that would hurt back.
Yeah, that's great. I've even heard some programs will do surveys of students who bail. That
Yeah, that
actually be able to get
really
them to do a survey. Hey, why happen? Great. What else? What we do to help our students? I think those micro things that the President was talking about. Yes.
So anthropology had some programmatic focus on making sure we have a solid mentorship program. So we've been trying to work with our advisors on making sure that we have an alert system for our students to get in for mentorship with our tenure track faculty. That way every major is there, but in our group we were talking about that a lot of times it's not your majors in your first couple classes that are the ones that end up taking the first test, not maybe doing the way they thought they would, trying out the quiz and then not coming to the rest of the class. And that accounts for, in my experience, the lion's share of any Fs that, I end up having to deal out. So in our 1105 class in anthropology, that's a science course that non-science students end up taking a lot. They're nervous about science. So they're scared from the beginning, and I want them to feel like they have a chance to find out that things aren't going well, and they have a chance to recover. So there's an improvement system for all sections in that class where if they improve from first test to second test by 10 or more points, so 10 points gives them 2 points on the class average, 20-point improvement gives them 4 points on the class average. At that point, a student that gets a 40 and gets scared isn't going to bowl as easily because they know that if they stay in the game and figure out what went wrong, they can recover and not have to retake the class. And so I wanted a route for those students, and we end up giving, I would say on a 35-person class, between 4 and 12 students earn at least some extra credit points at that scale. So that has helped, I think, a little bit with those early classes that can be scary and students can bounce right off.
So we brought up, it was a question about advising. Are students seeing from the start the big picture and having things not plotted the semester and then waiting until the next semester, but able to see what all terms, all semesters look like for their 4 years all the way to graduation, so that they see a full roadmap, knowing that it's flexible, but they can see the end goal is here and I've got to do all this up to that.
Some of that can tie into the mentorship too, if they know they can take a big picture. Yeah, maybe the last one.
Yeah, our questions were a little different. We wanted to know whether or not West Georgia is a working person's college. How many of our students compared to at our benchmarks actually work 20 hours a week or more?
while taking classes. We also wanted to know when the timer starts, when we get dual enrollment students, is that year one? We've got and how many dual enrollments do we have compared to some of those benchmarks?
Your questions. All right, folks, thank you so much for wrapping our heads around. I know this is not gonna go away. Clearly, it's an important item to work on. I'll tell you, the last thing that I think that as faculty is our piece for this is how do we tackle this by hanging on to the rigor? That's important. I know that's gonna be at the forefront of my mind, so. When our students do get to graduation and cross that finish line, that credential that they have, it's not just our job to get them there, it's also our job to protect the value of that credential. So I appreciate that all of these things are at the forefront of our minds. So thank you all. Keep doing your good work.
Thank you.